Okay. We want to make sure that we are starting on time. So Rachel, if I could ask you to please fade us out of our music. You're just saying to the end there. I'm so glad everyone, well, lots of folks are as much of Vivaldi fans as I am. So thank you all for letting us greet you in a very wintry and lively way. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Our meeting today, our launch event today is being recorded. And so it will be shared far and wide with anyone who was not able to register or who has registered and was not able to be here. I am incredibly thankful to be joined today by several great leaders in this movement to stop the plastic pollution crisis who have really stepped up along with all of you on the line to really solve this crisis and make our demands and our asks a reality. Just a couple of technical notes for the event. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jane Patton. I'm the campaigns manager for plastics and petrochemicals with the Center for International Environmental Law. As many of you know, we have been engaged in this global policy conversation around plastics, both through UNEA, but also through institutions like the Basel Convention and other spaces for a number of years now. And we are very, very honored to be facilitating this conversation today and to be entrusted with some facilitation of our task force and coalition moving forward. So as I mentioned, a couple of tech notes. We will only have time for 1 or 2 questions in the Q&A after our panelists speak. So this is really a tight launch event, but we are more than happy to have folks follow up with our panelists after the conversation. So if a question that you had did not get answered, folks' contact information will be put in the chat, and you'll be able to follow up with them afterwards. We also, Rachel Radvani from the CL team is our, and Rosella Recupero from the CL team are both our tech leads on today's call. So if you have any tech issues, you can reach out to both of them. And if you are here joining us today from the press and you have questions or would like to have follow-up interviews with anyone, Rosella is going to be your main point of contact. So feel free to message her directly or to email her after this call, and we will help set that up. So just a couple of introductory remarks from me before we hear from our panelists and responses from some government representatives that we have on the line with us today. Plastics, as many of you know, is a growing crisis for the environment, human health, human rights, biodiversity, and the climate. Global actions to address plastics and plastic pollution are urgently needed. As numerous studies have demonstrated, plastic has been found everywhere, not only in ecosystems and the atmosphere, but also in the food we eat, the water we drink, and even inside of our own bodies. Plastic presents a number of unique challenges that make narrow approaches to the crisis insufficient. The science is clear, and today we are coming together to say firmly that what is needed to curb the plastic pollution crisis is the adoption of an international legally binding agreement. The solutions to the plastics crisis will be as complex and multifaceted as the crisis itself. To be effective, a plastics treaty should address the full life cycle of plastics with actions across the global supply chain, from the extraction of raw materials that make plastics through to the legacy plastic pollution that is currently in our environment. A new treaty should, of course, aim to ensure that the amount of new plastics we produce has to stop going up and has to start going down. Reuse, refill, and redesign must become the norm. It's critical that governments and companies redesign how we use and make plastics to eliminate hazardous substances and the runaway climate emissions from production, use, and disposal of plastics. More than 156 countries have themselves joined the chorus in support of a new global treaty to address the plastics crisis. As of today, 81 states and the European Union have endorsed the Oceans Day Declaration for a legally binding global agreement on plastics, and many more countries have expressed their support in global policy forums over the past year. And we are at a pivotal moment in this growing momentum toward a new treaty. Draft resolutions are now on the table for UNEA 5.2, which would create an intergovernmental negotiating committee to begin negotiating the treaty. We are asking countries to endorse the ambitious resolution proposed by Rwanda and Peru and over 40 co-authors. It's the only proposal that includes parameters for discussing the comprehensive and complex elements that will be needed that will need to be decided by our governments in order to reduce toxic harms, reduce plastic pollution in the environment, and frankly, save lives. Regional and national action plans will, of course, be key to our success in ending the harms from plastics and plastic pollution, but they will not be sufficient to address the scope of the crisis, and thus we must act together. I am honored to participate in this announcement today of our collective call to action to governments to move away from false solutions and toward real solutions to the world's plastic crisis. We are from civil society, Indigenous peoples, workers and trade unions, women and children and youth, representing now more than 750 groups and organizations from all facets of the human experience. We signatories draw from more than 120 countries on 6 continents, representing several million members, volunteers, and community members globally. This joint call to action is the first of its kind, focused on a new treaty on plastics. And we're happy to welcome a few of the leaders who have signed the call, along with honored representatives from some of the countries leading the way toward a world free from the harmful impacts of plastics on humans, the environment, and the climate. And with that, I am going to invite our friend Griffiths Ochieng, who is the programs coordinator from the Center for Environment Justice and Development, CJAD, based out of Nairobi, Kenya. Griffiths, can I invite you to take the floor?
Thank you very much, and greetings everyone. Good evening, good morning, from wherever you're joining from. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel today. I just want to start by saying that this is a very timely panel discussion at the time when we are preparing for the next United Nations Environment Assembly. And in terms of what's coming up, I think we have a great opportunity to have a very clear way forward on the issue of plastic pollution. And with the Rwanda-Peru resolution that I want to call on you to urge your member countries to support, especially the resolution seek to establish an INC with a very ambitious mandate that will address the issue of plastic pollution. Emphasizing the need to have a very clear mandate from the INC that will focus on the aspect of the life cycle of plastic, particularly from production of the plastics. And in particular, the current resolution has specific focus on product design in paragraph 2C, as well as other elements that are very crucial for us to be able to have a robust global agreement or treaty on plastic pollution. I've been working on this topic, and particularly in the Africa region, which is a net importer of products, and especially chemicals, material products. We have a big challenge on plastic waste. It's very important for the region, and they have been very much supportive of this resolution of the issue of plastic pollution. One of the sponsors of the resolution and many other co-sponsors are from the Africa region. Rwanda has been, a country that has been very much a leader in the issue of plastic pollution or addressing the issue of plastic, having banned the single-use polythene bag for many years. And this has been followed by countries like Kenya, where I'm based, among others. So they are taking lead on this. And even during the ad hoc expert group on plastic pollution, or rather on the ad hoc expert group that was created from the last UNEA Africa region that I worked very closely with, focused to ensure that they support a response option that is a global agreement to address this menace. Despite many other regions, countries of the view that we do not need an agreement, a global agreement, because we have existing instruments, but we kept saying that there is a big challenge, especially because those other instruments do not address the life cycle of plastic. So this is a very momentum opportunity to be able to have a very clear agreement and ambitious mandate in order to negotiate an INC or a treaty that will address the plastic in its full life cycle. So thank you very much. I didn't prepare but I wanted to make an emphasis on the issue of how this is very important to the Africa region. And thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you very much, Griffiths. And we are so glad that you were able to join us today. And now I would like to invite I would like to invite Carmen Capriles, founder and coordinator of Reacción Climática in Bolivia, to also share some thoughts with us. Carmen? Carmen might be having some connection issues. Are you there, Carmen?
She's saying, please unmute me.
You have to unmute yourself, Carmen. I've asked you to unmute, but I'm not able to unmute you. Let me see. I'm going to touch base with Carmen directly and see if I can get her unmuted. But just for the sake of time, can I actually go ahead and invite our next speaker, Vito Blansante, who is the Policy and Technical Advisor from the International Pollutants Elimination Network, IPEN, based out of Canada. Vito, can you go ahead and then I'll work with Carmen?
Sure, no problem. I hope you hear me well. Thank you, Jane, and greetings from Canada to you all. So IPEN is a network of 600 non-governmental organizations working in more than 120 countries to reduce and eliminate the harm to human health and to the environment from toxic chemicals. And obviously plastics are important in that respect, as our toxic chemicals in plastic campaign seeks to really to eliminate the harm from chemicals that are present in plastics when they're produced, used, recycled, and discarded. We know there's already an overwhelming support for the treaty on plastics. We know that over 150 countries have voiced some support to a plastics treaty. So the question is not to convince governments that a treaty is needed, but as it was underlined by Jane at the beginning, is like, what kind of treaty do we need? If we look at a treaty, only look at plastic litter, that will almost certainly serve the status quo and continue to produce as much plastic or continue to produce more plastic without taking into account the impact that plastic has, not only to the environment, but also to human health. And it would continue to offset the cost of the pollution that plastic causes, especially in countries that are mainly importers, like Africa, like the African continent. So IPEN's view is that the overarching goal of the treaty should be really to eliminate the toxic impacts of plastics throughout their life cycle: production, transport, use, and disposal. So, and within the efforts to document the toxic impacts of plastics, IPEN today actually launched 2 studies with the role to expose how toxic chemicals play a role in, or how plastics play a role in transporting toxic chemicals around the world. So we worked with 35 NGO partners and a partner NGO, International Pellet Watch, to investigate the hazardous chemicals and pollutants present both in pre-production plastics and in recycled plastic pellets. And I want to underline what we found for recycled pellets. And we found like many chemicals of concern, including flame retardants, bisphenol A, toxic UV stabilizers, which means that these toxic chemicals may go into any products out of control. So if we're talking and thinking about a circular economy for plastics, where there's a toxic chemical in them, that means more health harms. And this is what the treaty should look at. And I, as well, would like to underline the fact that the Rwanda Peru resolution specifically looks at the design of plastics. Paragraph 2C, as Griffiths underlined, calls for addressing product design and use, including compounds, additives, and harmful substances. And if we look at concurrent resolutions that were proposed, those specifically don't want to address design. And so this is really a game changer. If we don't redesign the way we make plastics, if we don't get rid of the toxic impacts, both in the production, in the transport, in the extraction, and in the end of life, when we avoid incineration, etc., the treaty won't make a difference. So let's call for a treaty that really has a positive impact on the entire life cycle and gets rid of all the toxic impacts. And finally, I just want to say what is important is that we need a participatory process that includes all the people that are affected by the negative impacts of plastics around the world. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you, Vito, and thank you so much for IPEN's important work here. I have just dropped in the chat a link to your new study. And we are still trying to get Carmen connected. So we're going to move on to our next speaker now and then come back to Carmen again in a second. So at this moment, I would like to invite Mr. Bertdevel, who is the Climate Policy Officer from the International Trade Union Confederation. He's based out of Brussels. Bert, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Jane. That would be an honor. It's an honor for us to share our views on the initiatives, and we are very happy to support it. So, as Jane was indicating, I'm policy officer at the International Trade Union Confederation. I'm accountable to 200 million workers in 163 countries, and that's the global trade union movement. We very much support the call for a global treaty on plastic pollution. We think that recognize that the unsustainable increase in production and use of plastic must stop. It's threatening our beaches, seas, and oceans. It's polluting our food, water, and air. It's endangering and contaminating all life on Earth. It's also a driver for the fossil fuel industry that is at the core of the climate crisis. The global trade union movement has stepped up its environment work, first by mobilizing our members with the slogan, "There are no jobs on a dead planet." For many in fossil fuel industries, chemical industries, this is definitely not a fancy call or an empty call. Their livelihoods depend on these jobs, and often these are well-paying jobs, sometimes the only good jobs around. And that's why the trade union movement has launched the concept of just transition to deal with this challenge. And we want to integrate, we think that integrating in an honest way the social impact of all environmental issues, that this will increase the possibilities of solving these issues in an efficient way. And just transition is about setting up social dialogue processes with workers and their representatives, that are the unions, to manage the transition. I want to flag the Paris Agreement, which, for example, explicitly refers to the imperative of a just transition for the workers and the creation of decent work and quality jobs. All countries have signed this agreement. The International Labour Organization, ILO, has developed guidelines to set up just transition plans. And these plans have received a lot of attention in the climate debate, with processes in Eastern Europe, Germany, South Africa, to manage the coal phase out, or the transition on offshore oil to renewables in Scotland. And in Spain, we have regional just transition plans. But we think that we need the same or similar just transition plans in the chemical sector to stop this unsustainable boom in plastic production. This means sectoral just transition plans in every country based on genuine social dialogue processes with workers and communities at the table. Labor and human rights need to be protected to build trust. We want to stress a lot that labor rights are human rights. It's about the freedom of association, to form trade unions and to defend the rights of the workers, to organize the workers on the work floor, and to set up collective bargaining about decent work and the creation of quality jobs. Nobody should be left behind in the transition out of this plastic contamination. We strongly hope that these elements can be picked up in the negotiations on this new global treaty, and that's why we support this call. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward in the coming weeks and months in the run-up to UNEA 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. And we are honored to be joined by ITUC and a number of workers and trade unions representatives on this call. And the just transition will obviously be a key part of our solutions to the global plastic pollution crisis. And with that, I would now like to officially welcome an upside down Carmen Capriles. There we go. So Carmen, go ahead.
Hello, sorry. Well, right now, in a seminar about mercury with the ministry here in my country, we were just showing a study that we did with IPEN and the results that we had. And I'm highlighting this because I think it's important when there is this international agreements to put a lot of pressure. So in places where there isn't enough political will, we can, as civil society, press so these treaties can really achieve what they have to do. And I think that is why it's so important to keep supporting and to keep on working to get this treaty on plastics. That is the resolution that has been proposed by Rwanda and Peru within the UNEA framework. And I think it's important that we all support this. And it is a great challenge that we have in the case specific of plastic, because almost all of us are being exposed to it, to single-use plastics. And we understand how challenging it's going to be to change that way of life, of having everything disposal, to have a more conscious way of life where we understand what's the value of the resources, what is going on when we're using any of this kind of resources. And well, I'm also a focal point for the women's major group during UNEA. And one of the things that is important is also to acknowledge how all these plastics are contaminating women and are contaminating children, and how they can become disruptors of endocrinological disruptors, and how they can start contaminating and polluting us from the inside. So I think those are some of the aspects that we are discussing within the different major groups, and also within the women's major group, in order to push for a resolution during UNEA 5.2 that acknowledges the urge and the huge need that we have to have a plastic treaty that is binding, that is global, that includes all the countries, and where we are able to commit not only governments, but also civil society to give this step to a more conscious way of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, and everyone who has offered an intervention today. And now I'd like to actually put a question to all of our panelists. So Carmen, Vito, Bert, Griffins, we invite you all to offer an answer to this question, which is really at the root of our conversation today. How can members of civil society, Indigenous peoples, workers and trade unions, women, children and youth, and other groups, how can they advocate with their own governments to push for support of a treaty? What could that work look like over the next 2 years? Maybe I can call on you in some order just to make it easier. Vito, can you offer a response first?
Sure, thanks, Jane. And obviously that's an important question, and we need to stimulate our governments to act. And I think in the spirit of what the IPEN does is like really to expose what are the issues of plastic that go beyond the visible pollution. I think many people notice like how plastics is a litter problem, like we see it at the corner of the streets, but there's much more to that. There's the impact that plastics has on communities. And I mean, I live in Canada, and we have Indigenous communities in around the factories that are impacted by the industrial pollution that comes from the production of plastics. But then we have all the invisible pollution that comes from the toxic chemicals that we're exposed to every day, and that we bring home, and it breaks down, and it's with the home. And that has been documented in a lot of studies, particularly recently, looking at the impacts on reproduction. And one final thing that I would like to say is to expose, and that has been very powerful as a message. Like when our waste from developed countries finds its way to developing countries, to countries that don't have the means to process all the waste that is sent to them. And looking at a plastic bag that comes, or a product that comes from Canada, from the US, from Europe, and find them on the shores of Indonesia, of Bangladesh, and these countries, or in any African landfill where we send these plastics, thinking that they will be recycled, can be a powerful message and could be an important tool to bring these countries on board. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. And Bert, how can people support workers and trade unions in advocacy with their countries around the treaty?
Thank you. I think there's 2 ways. First, mobilizing our affiliates and their members, and I think that the movement organizations behind this campaign have done a lot of work, a huge amount of work with providing this information. If I'm living here 60 kilometers from the port of Antwerp, where Ineos is planning to build a huge new plastic factory. You have made a lot of very strong and good material to provide to our groups, to our members in these sectors, to understand what game they are playing. Because there's huge economic interests behind these investments, and the creation of jobs, good paid jobs, is often an issue that's being abused by politicians, by local development organizations, and you need to be very strong to stand up in these discussions. And with the material that the network has provided, I think we might have a better chance to have a better view on it. And it is we are convinced that we have to work also inside the sector, the organizations much more, the workers much more on speaking up against these practices. And there is good hope to work with our industry federations that are picking up much more. And these are the trade unions that organize by sector. They're stepping up their work on just transition much more, and that's will be crucial information to lobby governments and to do this advocacy work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carmen, what's your take on how folks can talk to their governments about the treaty?
Wow, that's a very complex question, but I would like to share also that this study that we held with this indigenous population about mercury. They are nomads. So what they do is they go to for example, the dumpsters of the towns nearby, and they start watching in the trash, and they start collecting things. And for many of us, from our Occidental point of view, that may seem gross, but the truth is that all that plastics are resources that we don't value. We are treating plastic like if it was the peel of an orange or the peel of a banana, that we can just throw it and expect that it will biodegrade and will integrate into the system again. But that's not how plastics work, and we know that. And I think it's we have to do a lot of raising awareness around the impacts that plastic have, and a lot of research, make all that dark part that plastics have available for the public, because we don't really get to see what's behind a plastic spoon or any other single-use plastic. So sorry, as soon as we understand what the whole story is, where this spoon is coming from, this petroleum thing, and where it's going to be, and that is going to be 100 years in our environment, even after we're gone, all the single-use plastics that we have used probably in our lifetime are going to still be on the environment. It has to be a very strong thought in order to make us do something. And I think if more people knew all this dark side of single-use plastics, I think we could really push governments in order to have better policies. And also I think it's important that women understand what this the plastics can do to health. For example, what are these things called? But they are these compounds that are organic and persistent that can be accumulated in your organism are important to acknowledge, because we don't know for sure. There aren't enough studies if there are links with cancer, for example, or other kinds of sickness. And we also don't know what happens with the babies, but we know that there are some substances that can be passed from mothers to children. And I think it's there is a very small line that divides plastic from other very hazardous compounds that are also toxic. So it's important that we understand what's going on and to seek for alternatives, more sustainable alternatives, and to start valuing that plastics are a lot of resources that we have. We cannot just use them and throw them. It needs to have another kind of value. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And Griffiths, can you round us out? How should people be advocating for the treaty with their governments?
Thank you for the question. Thank you very much, Jen. And I want to share, first of all, I think you mentioned where I'm from. I'm based in Nairobi, and greetings to you all and welcoming you all for the next UNEA coming here in Nairobi. So on the question, I just want to share a few points, I think 5 points, based on the experience that I've also had, because this is one area that I've been very much involved and engaged in when it comes to, engaging with government and our own government in such a kind of mission. So first, the first point I wanted to share for, based on my experience, is first, you need to identify the focal ministry or the agency that negotiates such a kind of meeting in the UNEA. Mostly it can be from Foreign Affairs Ministry or the Ministry of Environment. So that's very crucial for you to be able to advocate for your government to support the treaty. So after that, you can be able to approach the ministry that you identify and introduce your organization or your work that you've been doing. Sometimes you may have been engaging with your ministry in the work that you do at national level, or you have not been able to engage with the focal ministry or the focal person that you identified. It's good that you be able to introduce your work and also show how that is important for your country, and especially the issue of plastic, considering that your country has some specific position or that they present to these international meetings or multilateral environment agreements. Then you can be able, as you discuss with your focal ministry or focal point or focal person, you can be able to find out their position, because that's very important in order to know what they are presenting or what the position of the country, either at national level or as a region. And the experiences I have is that governments work with us differently in different countries. There are those countries or governments that are very open to working with civil society organizations. There are those that perhaps, because of historical or different experiences, are not very much open to the work that you do. So that's very important in terms of when you introduce your organization's work and how it helps complement the government in terms of the work they do. The fourth point is that it's important to engage with the focal person regularly. You'll be able to show the work that is developments have been taking place. You can provide updates. You have to keep yourself informed of what's happening, especially in the run-up to UNEA, for example. And you can invite them as well to your organization activities to present the kind of work you're doing. Maybe you have released a report or there are new findings. That is very important that a policymaker will be keen to know and reinforces the position that the country wants to present in such a meeting. So I think that's one way, or you can be able to engage your government and ask them toward supporting the treaty. If they're already supporting the treaty, well and good, you can be able to emphasize, amplify the position, look at how you strengthen the position they are going to, because we have to have the government speak, they are the decision makers at the UNEA meeting. Lastly, you can offer your help. I've offered my help to our government. They have invited, based on the rapport that you create, offer your help. You can help develop points, talking points, emphasize the significance of the issue to your country, to the region, especially also the aspect of human health and environment. Our policymakers, the governments, have a mandate obligation to protect the citizens. So how you bring this significance, and especially the discussions towards the treaty, is very crucial. So this is my experience that I wanted to share with folks on how they can be able to have their government support a treaty.
Thank you so much, Griffins, and to all the rest of our panelists. I think we're having just a few connection issues with Griffin. So what you're hearing is both detail in the process and how you do it, and you're hearing insight from these experienced folks about the things to talk about the things to emphasize, about the way to message this to your government. And now we would love to actually hear responses from some government representatives to this conversation and to this call to action that are on the line with us today. I'd like to invite Christopher Back-Vestley, who's an international relations officer with the DG Environment at the European Commission. Christopher, can you offer us a response and insights from the EU?
I'd be happy to. Thank you very much. First of all, I would say that these reflections made by colleagues have been very enlightening to me. As you may be aware of, the EU has taken a leading role in the work towards a global agreement on plastics. The reason why we have done that relates to particularly two things. First, the transition to a circular economy in Europe, which is a green growth strategy to establish and make sure that our economy is sustainable for the future, which is also a cornerstone of the European Green Deal. Second, the fight on plastic pollution. We have implemented several different pieces of EU legislation and efforts on plastics in our region, which is very important. And we have taken measures to address plastic by its source. That is key in the plastic track of the European Union in our Circular Economy Action Plan, which you also will see more of next year when we will launch a new Sustainable Products Initiative. So these two elements, the shift to a circular economy in Europe, depending on global markets, and the fight on plastic pollution are important, but they cannot, the fight on plastic pollution cannot be done by the EU alone. And the shift to a circular economy in Europe depends on a shift to a circular economy globally. So we need to take both these elements to the global level. So what the EU has been doing in order to do that, we have been as the first 27 member states to co-sponsor the resolution by Peru and Rwanda, and working very close with our like-minded countries to make sure that we mobilize as much support as possible for the Peru and Rwanda initiative. And in that regard, the civil society have been very helpful and played a key role. Not only we're not doing that only to highlight high ambition, but to make sure that there is a common understanding for the need to export the circular economy to the global level as a key solution to the crisis. More specific, we see that design and measures in the upstream part of the life cycle of plastics are particularly important, as 80% of the environmental footprint is determined in that phase of the life cycle. And that has been very central in our communication. Additionally, the role of the national action plans, we believe that countries should have the possibility to act based on their national circumstances. At the same time, there is a need for global targets, a global goal that will guide and be clear for implementing policies at a national and regional level. I think on participation by stakeholders, IPEN mentioned something important. I mean, several colleagues mentioned important things, and relating to the implementation of the national action plans, stakeholders will play a key role. The development of industries in countries and regions, their important role in policy developments, bringing knowledge to the decision-making table, very, very important. That would also play a key role in the preparations on the treaty under the negotiations. It's important that civil society encourages the governments to formalize their supports, which comes back to the question on how we want to transform and build our economies. We believe that the green transition is key, and the civil society must be very clear that this is not a question of how much efforts to combat plastic pollution will cost. It is about emphasizing that the cost of non-action probably will be much more and have a much bigger negative impact on our economies. So that's why we support and very much want to highlight that the shift to a circular economy is needed in order to tackle plastic pollution, and that's a level of ambition in the mandate that UNEA 5.2 gives to the INC is very important. And we need to take that opportunity and use the momentum we have now to do that. And to that, I would also like to add that the participation of civil society by stakeholders, not only in the implementation of such a treaty, but in the preparations and where we are now before we even have a mandate is very, very important. So with that, thank you very much, and happy to hear some comments and questions related to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. And I think you are getting some comments and questions in the chat. So thank you for being here. On the note of countries really stepping forward to take a lead on this issue, we'd like to now hear a pre-recorded message actually from His Excellency, the Ambassador from Peru, the Ambassador of Peru to the United Nations in Geneva. Peru, as has been noted, is one of the lead co-authors and co-sponsors of the current draft resolution on the table to create the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to begin negotiating the treaty. And we would now like to hear from him.
Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Center for International Environmental Law for the invitation to this important event on the occasion of the launch of the call to action for a new global agreement to address the global plastic crisis. As you might already know, Peru and Rwanda, with a group of countries, are putting forward a draft resolution to end marine litter and plastic pollution. As of today, 45 member states from different regions across the world are co-sponsoring this resolution. Azerbaijan, Cabo Verde, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, the European Union and its member states, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Guinea, Kenya, Madagascar, Norway, Philippines, Senegal, Switzerland, Uganda, and United Kingdom joined Peru and Rwanda in this endeavor to move forward in addressing marine litter and plastic pollution. We are expecting more countries to support this resolution in the coming days. We believe that the moment has come to take concrete actions, in particular at the upcoming UNEA 5.2. This initiative builds upon previous resolution of the UNEA, as well as important inputs received by the civil society, and is put forward under the firm conviction that greater international measures are needed to prevent and reduce plastic pollution in the environment, including microplastic. The main purpose of the resolution is to convene an Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee, INC, and establish an open mandate for negotiations to develop a new legally binding global instrument. This new legally binding instrument should be based on a comprehensive approach to prevent and reduce plastic pollution in the environment by promoting a circular economy in addressing the full life cycle of plastics, from production, consumption, and design to waste prevention and management and treatment. We consider it important to have key elements considered in this future instrument, such as shared objectives, reporting and monitoring aspects, national action plans and commitments, scientific and technical support, as well as financial and technical assistance. Peru is confident that the call to action put forward by the civil society will provide important support to this initiative. My delegation will continue to engage all relevant stakeholders, including civil society, in an open, transparent, participatory, and inclusive manner. I would like to thank the organizers again for promoting this event in order to build momentum on this crucial matter, which I am sure will contribute to pave the way towards a new agreement that will tackle such an important issue as plastic pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. We hope that you leave this conversation knowing that the time to act is now, that everyone needs to be acting and speaking with their governments on this issue, and that you are not alone. There is a coalition of over 750 organizations who have come together in this call to action to say, we need a new global legally binding treaty to address the plastics crisis throughout the life cycle of plastics. And in closing, I will say, if you have any follow-up questions, you are welcome to email me. I've just put my email in the chat. If you have not yet signed the call to action or you want to sign it, we now have a new website and landing page, thanks to our partner, Christopher Chin from CORE, who was able to get our website set up. And if you want to share information or comment on this on social media, please use the hashtags plastics treaty and UNEA5. And with that, good luck to everyone in reaching out to your governments and getting formal support and formal sign-on for the Rwanda-Peru resolution going into UNEA 5.2. And we hope to see you all again soon. And thank you, and please enjoy the rest of your day or evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you.